Inside New Orleans Sports with Eric Asher is underwritten by...
At Villere's Florist, we deliver the magic of flowers 7 days a week to the North Shore and South Shore in the New Orleans area. Whether it's for birthday parties, baby celebrations, Villere's provides colorful floral displays for all. With a store full of fresh-cut flowers, exotic tropical flowers, orchids, roses, and even fruit baskets, our goal is to make your vision a reality. Villere's Florist, proudly serving Louisiana since 1969.
Dave Miette Insurance Agency, 504-556-0809 or davemietteINSagency.com.
For over 48 years, Southern Tires and Auto Repair has provided services across the New Orleans metro area. Southern Tires offers a range of tires for all vehicles and ATVs. We also have a full suite of auto repair options, including brake repair, rim repair, custom exhaust, steering and suspension, and so much more. Southern Tires and Auto Repair, 2550 Hickory Avenue in Metairie.
Cnc Drugs is a family-owned pharmacy that's been serving Southeast Louisiana for over 50 years. Whether you need help taking care of an elderly family member, a growing child, or even a pet, Cnc provides patient-centered care for your entire family. Cnc Drugs, large enough to serve you, small enough to know you. Locations in Mandeville and Araby.
Good afternoon and welcome to another edition of Inside New Orleans Sports on this beautiful Holy Thursday in Old New Orleans. Check out this weather, huh? This view, incredible. And of course, we are live streaming on the WLAE-TV YouTube page. And of course, we're on WLAE-TV. There's a lot of ways to catch us. We'll tell you about that at the end of the program. But looking forward to a great show today with Jude Young of CrescentCitySports.com and 106.1 FM. We're going to cover everything today with Jude. Jude, welcome to the show as always, my friend. And why don't you tell us about your great site and, of course, about your show that follows me on 106.1 FM.
It's always a pleasure to be here, and absolutely CrescentCitySports.com. We're covering everything, high school, college, and the pros, and there's always something breaking, so we have that information on for you all the time, and we really do have, I think, as good of analysis as you're going to find. Always free, plus live streaming games. We have a lot of high school games. Baseball season is going to be wrapping up in the next few weeks, and we're going to have a lot of the big matchups for you available as well. And of course on the radio, on the station with you over at Cumulus New Orleans, 106.1 FM. I'm part of the All Access team, the 6 o'clock hour following Eric's show. Weekdays, and usually do the Tuesday nights, but fill in here and there. We're going to have some live games coming up, so I'll be bouncing around the schedule, but Ken Trahan and I try to do our best to follow in your footsteps.
Well, I don't know about all that. You talk about Ken Trahan, get out of here. Voice of UNO Athletics, of course, as well, and also some things you guys are doing with CrescentCitySports.com is bringing high school sports to 106.1 FM. So again, whether it's baseball, like it's Rumble Baseball right now, UNO Baseball, part of the mix over there, UNO Basketball. During the football season, you guys are broadcasting high school football games. So again, another place we can catch high school sports.
Right, and we certainly want to be able to expand that as folks. And I wonder, as we work out of this pandemic, if fewer people are going to be wanting to go to games. And there are a lot of games that are streamed with video now, but there's still a value to radio and being able to move around town and be able to enjoy and listen to a ball game. And Ken Trahan works really hard to make that happen. And obviously the relationship with UNO, happy to have brought that to Cumulus, and it's been a good partnership, and we'll have baseball games throughout the rest of the season and all of UNO's postseason games. So that's really nice to add to what makes radio, I think, still special is there's a beauty in broadcasting live games, and to be able to do that for the college level and the high school level is just another benefit to being at a great station.
And of course, I mean, just all the great local writers over at CrescentCitySports.com. Got to check it out. Let's start. We normally start with Saints, but my guy here is a big baseball fan, and not only that, knows the sport inside and out. Today is opening day for Major League Baseball. Tell us about this season.
Well, it's going to be 162 games, or as close to it as they can get, and I'm really excited about that. Last year's 60-game sprint just didn't feel right, although I think they pulled off a really good postseason. They're going to be back to the 10-team postseason, at least for this year. I think they're going to expand in the future. So the regular season, that marathon that it is, matters again. It's traditional. It's going to be nice to enjoy. I think we're going to see more changes in the future, though. So, again, enjoy the tradition while it lasts. But it'll be interesting. It's the Yankees, a heavy favorite in the American League, and of course the world champion Dodgers, a huge favorite in the NL. I would say that the National League, though, is the one to watch because it looks like it has the more of the younger, brighter talent, and it's just a deeper pool of really good teams. But at the same time, whoever comes out of the American League, teams that have been really good in recent years, not only the Yankees, but could be the Tampa Bay Rays. Of course, the Houston Astros have been regulars in the ALCS, and you can't count out Minnesota as a team that continues to show that they're going to be a regular contender. I think both leagues are going to wind up having really strong postseason teams, but I'm excited about the National League, even though I'm an Astros fan at heart, because I think the depth in both the Eastern and Western divisions really going to be fun to watch.
Yeah, and it's good to get back to a sense of normalcy with the sport. I mean, again, we're seeing with the NBA, college basketball did a great job with the bubble, and of course getting through their season. Of course, the NFL, they were champions at it, again, and not missing a game. So again, slowly but surely, as the vaccinations ramp up, get back to a sense of normalcy here. And one day soon, we're going to be having a reporters roundtable once again. So we're looking forward to that as well. Let's jump into it. Saints. Hate to jump into the Saints with the police blotter, but it is the biggest story for the Saints over the last week. Marshawn Lattimore, in his hometown of Cleveland Thursday night, was arrested for possession of a stolen Glock 19. It was loaded. It was on his person. He did not alert police that he had a weapon on him. It was the Cleveland gang unit that actually stopped this car. Three other people were in the vehicle, also, again, having illegal weapons on them. And also were charged with having a gun on disability, meaning felons, and also the improper handling of a weapon in a car. This is not good for Marshawn Lattimore on any level. He is at $10.2 million restricted, his fifth-year option right now with the Saints. The hope is, again, getting a long-term deal done with them. This may end up, and I would think, no matter what happens, unless somehow he's cleared. I don't know how you do that when you've got a gun on you that is stolen, but there could be a suspension here. The most mind-blowing thing about this, though, is, come on. You're a professional football player. You're in the spotlight. You have money. You've made millions of dollars. And I understand athletes maybe want to have a weapon on them, but a stolen weapon, that just reeks of just being dumb, just plain dumb. I mean, that's as easy as you can put it.
You really can't defend it.
There's no defending it at all. And look, he has not been a guy that's been in trouble. His lawyer, again, mentioned that he's been a solid citizen. But again, look, it goes back to that old deal. Once you're in a position that you're in as you grow into an adult and you become a professional, whatever you're in, yes, you want to be able to have the closest of the folks you grow up with, the people you grow up with, but sometimes you have to separate yourself.
Right.
And especially professional athletes in a lot of cases. What are your thoughts on just this whole deal? Because, look, this really hurts the Saints one way or the other because cornerback's probably the weakest position on this team right now.
That's true. And just to touch on I think you hit all the key points. I think it's important to stress that we're not picking on a professional athlete here. It doesn't matter who it is and what profession. You're an adult and you have to handle yourself a certain way. Not saying that we all don't make mistakes, not saying that most of the times we all have life decisions that we regret, but when you are a public figure, and that's what a professional athlete making the kind of money, the star that he is, when you're a public figure, you've got to handle yourself in a different way. You need to be held to a higher standard because you represent an organization and you represent a league in this case, and it's going to be the league in the end that's going to decide how they're going to come down on Marshawn Lattimore. And just putting that aside, we don't know any other information that's going to tell me it's going to be a major deal outside of potentially a smaller suspension. Right. But for the big picture, that does make it harder for him to justify the long-term contract at the money he feels he deserves as a number one corner when you go a year from now, if the Saints and assuming they're still willing,
Yes.
don't come to a long-term extension with him. We'll see how that works out. It certainly would benefit the Saints financially to open up more salary cap room because they're still not exactly where they need to be after a couple of the veteran moves I'm sure we'll get to in a little while. So the point for Lattimore in this case, in the big picture, is it is a professional athlete deal, and it seems like few have learned from what happened to Michael Vick. You can talk about staying tight with the people that you grew up with,
Right.
recognizing the fact that you were lucky, you were blessed with certain talents to allow you to elevate yourself perhaps from difficult living situations, difficult level in society. But at the same time, you should be lifting them up. You shouldn't be allowing them to drag you back down. If you're in that position, then you need to take the lead with these people, and if you're unable to do so, you need to separate from them. You need to help them make their lives better in a positive way. Get them away from illegal activity, or you absolutely have to separate yourself. Maybe because of the level of his particular transgression here, it's enough that he can extricate himself from making those mistakes in the future, and it'll be a tough, but not as tough as it could have been, learning experience. That's what you hope for. And as far as the Saints looking at Lattimore as an asset, you talked about it. Outside of him, they don't have a single starting caliber cornerback on the team.
That's right.
And who knows how they're going to do in the draft and in the market when they have more money in the future to spend on free agents. They really need Lattimore to be extended and to work out and stay out of trouble and just be a good football player. It's really going to hurt this team's chances of, we talk about keeping the window open. Well, even if it's slightly closing for this year because of circumstances like Breeze's retirement, it's very much capable of being reopened because there's so much talent on the team. They've got more draft assets, but not if you're terrible in the secondary, and particularly at the corner spot. You can't survive. So this is a big deal long term if Lattimore becomes a problem that the Saints can't deal with.
The mind-blowing thing is, again, broken taillight, car pulls them over, police car. It's the Cleveland gang unit.
Right.
Okay, so it's not, a patrolman going down the street, sees four guys in a car, broken taillight, decides to be able to pull them over. Obviously, these individuals were being watched in some form or fashion, and putting yourself in that position, having the stolen gun, just again doesn't make a lot of sense. Especially again, look, as I go back to, you've made so much money. Okay, why a stolen gun? Get a legal gun. You can get it in Ohio or in Louisiana and do it the right way. I don't think anybody, again, most people don't have the problem with him having the gun. We have a problem with having the stolen gun and then being in a company of felons as well.
And you'd like to know the backstory on how he took possession of the gun.
Right.
You'd like to know what the decision-making process was there. Is he just trying to be, I hate to say be cool, but to try to fit in? And it's like, here, we've got these and they're stolen, and you're making bad decisions to go, well, I want to fit in with my guys, so yeah, I'll take that. And the idea of maybe you think you're above the law and above what regular people in society have to deal with because you're a multi-million-dollar professional athlete. Again, we're trying to guess what's going on in Lattimore's head. There's no justifying the decision no matter what reasons there were for it. The question is, will he be able to be somebody who matures at this point? And the people who should know that best are Sean Payton and the folks inside the building on Airline. If they know him well enough, they're going to make the decision accordingly to either stick with him long term or start thinking about wiping their hands of it.
I agree. A couple things. First of all, the NFL has their own investigators. They will investigate this, as will the Saints, where they have their own investigative team as well. Because he has never been in trouble before and does not have a record, more than likely right now it was charged with a 4th-degree felony. That may be reduced down the line here, okay? But I don't know if how that's going to look in the eyes of the NFL. Just because, again, we've seen this again in the legal system where a player is able to work out a deal. That doesn't necessarily mean the NFL is going to go along with that deal, which means, again, for this team, just on the field, it may be scary that maybe you open up the season without Marshawn Lattimore for a couple games.
Exactly, and that scenario is something the Saints have to be planning
for.
No
doubt about it.
Because you're exactly right. No matter what happens with Lattimore in the legal system, the NFL is going to look at it on its face. These things did happen. They can't be denied, and there probably has to be some punishment for it. And, hey, even with adding an extra regular season game coming up here, the Saints are slow starters to begin with. How slow are they going to be if they don't have a starting caliber cornerback with any kind of experience? Are they going to throw 2 rookies they're about to pick in April? later this month out there. I mean, what are they going to do? I know they're looking at some of the veteran free agents, but they aren't exactly guys that you feel comfortable with. That you're talking about stopgap players who are older at this point, assuming, and I think they will, either before or after the draft, they're going to have to grab at least one of those guys. But you don't want to have to do that and have that guy be your number one on opening day.
And there's already going to be a drop-off from Joris Jenkins to whoever you're bringing in, right?
Sure, there's no question about that, unless you really hit big on, say, a first-round pick. And at this point, you'd have to say that cornerback would be the favorite for the number 28 overall pick because, yes, you want to take best player available, but the Saints may not be in that position when it comes to their needs, covering the best receivers in the league, starting with their own division, some of the very best. Right,
especially, again, with the draft picks that they've acquired, you know, within the last 6 months or so, through, again, compensatory picks, trades, etc. I think they're going to be very, very aggressive. And looking at this team right now, based on what they have, I got to believe corners got to be the priority going into this draft. And not one, as you mentioned, maybe two.
Right, and corner outside of any real depth as far as I think they feel comfortable with that safety, although they feel better there with a P.J. Williams who's versatile at least. They don't feel as good about him, I think, at corner at this point. So, again, that problem is glaring. But I also will point out that I'm sure they'd like to throw another talented linebacker into the mix because even though they played two on the field a majority of the time in this day's NFL, at the same time, what happens if Demario Davis gets hurt? It's the same scenario as Lattimore and maybe even worse.
No doubt, because at that point you got Caden Ellis and you got Bond, who you drafted last year. You know, both guys have not proven anything at this point. Craig Robinson's getting up in age. Who knows if he'll be with this team? Again, right now it looks like he will be. But look, we don't know what happens in training camp. I mean, he's an older guy. We could see again him drop in terms of his ability, and you know, from that point on, you're going with somebody else.
But again, complete lack of experience. That's the point. No matter how much talent they think they have in the door outside of Robertson, who shouldn't be playing regular snaps on defense anymore.
No, there's no doubt that the depth on this defense, and in some cases, starters on the defense were really affected by the purge because of the salary cap situation. Offensively, you know, they can live with the receivers they have, okay? I think they'll probably go out and maybe draft another one, but look, they seem to believe in the receivers. They've done something at the tight end position, bringing Vanette in, and of course, you know, well, they have a lot of faith in the rookie that they had last year. But, you know, we'll see. And look, the offensive line, for the most part, is intact. We'll get into the quarterback situation in a moment, but it's the defense that really took the hit in the offseason.
2 starting caliber defensive tackles, maybe your best just one-on-one individual edge pass rushers. So that's 3 across what was a deep and talented defensive line that's still talented but not necessarily so deep anymore. We mentioned linebacker. We mentioned the situation at cornerback. I mean, that's a lot of holes to fill, and even though they've got some picks to work with this time around, that's where I wonder, and I talked about it on my show last night, is this the time that the Saints, who are usually gung-ho, especially on day one of the draft on moving up, is this the point where unless somebody falls that they really had rated highly that fills a need, they really have to listen to trading back and maybe grab even more picks. Now, I have pointed out to people that it's also a fact that you don't necessarily want too many picks, even if you do a great job and they make your team in 1 year, because then that makes the decisions you have to make 4 years down the line even more difficult, because you have a lot of guys coming to potential big pay raises if you do draft extremely well. So that's long-term planning. The Saints are very good at that and how they handle the salary cap, as well as how they bring in players and how they situate their contracts. But at the same time, you need help. You need depth. You're going to need some young depth. At least you're going to have a regular training camp and somewhat of a regular offseason to get those guys ready to play that you didn't have last year. And I think you have to take advantage of the cheap labor that you desperately need at this point.
Well, I would agree. But I would say this, that the need for a starting caliber corner may push them in a position where they have to move up. To get one of those top 3 corners, that guy that maybe you can plug and play week 1.
And I don't know if that's in their range at this point. Farley, the cornerback from Virginia Tech, who was rated the number 1 guy across the board, has had some injury issues that may push him back a little bit. But Patrick Surtain II, he's going to be out of their range. Joe Horn's son, JC, looks like he's going to be out of their range.
4.39 last week.
So you're moving up maybe for Farley, at this point, because of issues that if you do your research on and don't think they're long-term, he's going to have starting caliber talent, should develop into one. After that, that. There's a good second wave, though. And I have a feeling the Saints are going to be able to sit there and wait and maybe get a corner they like in their lap. I do at number 28. Part of the reason why you're going to have at least 4 quarterbacks go. You're going to have the big-time tight end Pitts out of Florida go high. And starting with Jamar Chase, then the Alabama receivers and other receivers. A lot of offensive talent is going to go. Several linemen as well. So I think the defensive talent is going to be pushed down. And I think the Saints have to prioritize corner in particular a little more than even edge, which is really overdrafted in the NFL because of the importance of getting pass rush off the edge. Some edge guys may go earlier than they should, and that could help the Saints as well. I think they're going to get a really good player if they stay at 28, but they may have enough of a bullpen that they can move back and get more draft capital as well. I think that's more likely than them moving up.
This week, the Saints signed Tano Passano, 6'7", 289, defensive end from Kansas City. It was a 5-year deal, but it's really really kind of a 2-year deal based on what they do with the dummy years. Your thoughts on this acquisition?
I like him as somebody who may be an untapped gem. Kansas City really didn't figure out how to use them. They used him on both edges, right and left defensive end. They pushed him inside at times. You're talking about a guy who's 6'6", 6'7", 285. In a lot of ways, physically, he sort of compares to Davenport.
Right.
So now, maybe not on that freakish athletic level, but not that far off. He was a small college guy out of Villanova. They knew he was raw, and he's somebody that they can bring in and maybe play on either edge if they need him because he's played a lot of NFL snaps. And I think Ryan Nielsen probably had a big part of the decision-making process, as that's the type of guy on the market that we may be able to get more out of the way we want to use him and how we're going to coach him. The one thing I've seen said on him a lot is he really hasn't learned probably the greatest art that you need as a defensive lineman, whether you're playing end or tackle, and that's how to use your hands properly. He's a great athlete. He's trying to rely on his athleticism a little too much. If the Saints can coach that out of him, he could be something that's a total steal, but at the very least, at least he's somebody who's played snaps for a team that's won a world championship and been to back-to-back Super Bowls. He's made a lot of starts, so he can't be all that bad, even though you got him for cheap.
And supposedly the Saints have their eye on him, also Nielsen as well. So again, there's a little bit of a history there. So they've been keeping their eye out.
Well, think about it. It was the 2017 draft where the Saints hit a lot of home runs, so they couldn't get everybody that they liked.
That's true. And speaking of that, and I wanted to make this point, and I'm sure you would agree, this is the year you need another 2017 draft.
Sure.
Am I right?
No doubt.
I mean, this is you need to refill the losses that you dealt with because of the salary cap. And this is one of those years that you really need to. Now, again, remember that year you had 2 number 1 picks. Okay, now but you still hit on your later picks as well. But this has to be that type of year again.
And knowing this day would come, at least the Saints have done a nice job between planning up to it and the offseason so far. We talked about the offense. They brought back their entire running back room.
Yes.
I mean, they're led by Alvin Kamara. It's really good, keeping Latavius Murray, even though we heard rumors to the contrary. They're able to throw out a really good starting offensive line, and they like some of the young talent behind them. Keeping James Hurst as a swing tackle really helps them. I think they'll be looking for another interior lineman, though, in this draft, but it's not a priority because they've taken care of business. People wondering why they've been drafting interior offensive linemen in recent years. They know it's important, and it's going to help them now because they can attack different areas, particularly on the defense. Now, offensively, I guess the one I think that they might look for, and a lot of teams in the league are, everybody wants their Tyreek Hill or some version of it. The Saints really wanted to use Deontay Harris, who I don't think, based on the way he's built, can stay healthy enough for the usage rate that Sean Payton would love to have with him. I think they want to find somebody, a smaller, quicker in space, but dynamic, explosive receiver to play in the slot, to use as a matchup guy. I think they feel like they need that, and that's where a lot of the league is going. So that's somebody they may target second day of the draft. But other than that, they really have to focus on defense. I think they need somebody, and this is something you don't necessarily have to draft early either. One of the two, and a true starter last year, Malcolm Brown, your run stopper, your guy who can take up blocks. At least that's something you can target second, third, fourth round. They need the corner. I think they have to go higher with linebacker than they normally have, even with drafting Vaughn last year in the third. And chances are, if you want me to guess with 4 picks in the first 2 days right now, I would be shocked if one isn't a corner. I would be shocked if, less shocked, but still shocked if one isn't a defensive tackle, if they can find a good one that they believe in that can replace what Brown brought to the table as an unsung hero.
as mentioned, they signed Nick Vanette to go along with Adam Troutman, who was their high pick last year, a guy that was expected to start. He's more of a Josh Hill type.
Right.
Depending on what's going on, they may have to get another tight end as well.
Yeah, and I think
they use tight ends so many different ways. They may have to get another tight end.
I think they may need to do that, and at the same time, I'm wondering what they do at the quarterback position, because deep down inside, I think we all know that Jameis Winston is the future.
Yes.
But if at this point Taysom Hill is truly your primary backup, that really doesn't give you the flexibility to use him as he would be best used in the NFL.
Right.
Get him back in that role where he was so good late in 2019 as a tight end. He could be a playmaker for you at that position, and I think they really need it. He's more valuable there at his best from what we've seen in the league than he has been as a fill-in gimmick quarterback.
Look, I 100% agree with you, and they need a legitimate NFL backup to back up Jameis Winston. And look, you could still utilize him as a quarterback in certain formations to throw a defense off, but he's so valuable as a guy that does so many things for you. And again, because he does so many things, he becomes a weapon, and the defense has to account for him on every single play.
Absolutely. And, at the same time, they can get somebody of a Chase Daniel level in here that will certainly understand the system right away and be able to fill in, and in somebody that you're comfortable enough short-term playing. At the same time, as long as Hill doesn't get hurt as well, if something happened to Winston to take him out of the lineup that cost you enough games that you really need a better option, as long as Hill's healthy, he could still slot back in there.
Sure,
so you have those two options where you're getting the best out of your personnel. I would like to see the Saints go that route.
But on the other hand, and we saw this last year, right? The offense changes from Hill to Winston, much like it changed from Hill to Breeze, right?
Right.
So, assuming, and again, I think everybody would be right, unless, look, Hill beats him out, because it is going to be an open competition. Winston's going to be the starter. So we'll see how that kind of plays out. Speaking of Winston, look, I don't listen to a lot of podcasts because we're constantly working, right? But
we look for tweets to summarize the podcast for us.
But I listened to the Huddle and Flow podcast this week with Jameis Winston, and I would say, if you're a fan of the Saints and you've got an hour, because it's an hour now, I would go ahead and download that and listen to it. He said all the right things, but he said it with conviction.
You can't fake that
you
emotion.
Cannot. You cannot. Take it from there.
I was impressed by that because I think he is at his heart an emotional guy. But when you're emotional and immature, it's a really bad combo, and that hurt him in college off the field and then early in his NFL career. The talent is there. Winston at his best is certainly an NFL starting quarterback and maybe one of the best ones in the league. Can you get that out of him? Well, now I think you've got a better shot. Just celebrated his one-year wedding anniversary. That will mature a lot of people, and it seems to have had an effect on him. I think spending that time not only with Peyton as his coach, but Drew Brees in his last year, experiencing the emotions of Brees, dealing with injury, knowing it's his last shot at glory, and knowing what the man could teach him about playing the game the right way. I think Winston, in that short amount of time, probably gained a lot about that as he's reached a crossroads in his career. I think he's going to play well. I think he's going to play well enough for the Saints to win and be a playoff team. I'm much more concerned about those other areas we talked about with the holes on the roster. That's how much confidence I have in him being the type of guy that you look at the end of the season and it's like, oh, 28 touchdowns and 10 interceptions. You can win a lot of games if your quarterback's doing that.
Well, I mean, the only knock has been the 111 turnovers over the 5 years. That's it. And look, one of the things that really stuck out, I'm not going to be a gunslinger. I'm going to be a game manager. And he kind of went into that in the podcast. That, it was almost like nobody wants to be a game manager.
Right.
But that is not taboo. I mean, everybody forgets Brees was a little bit of a gunslinger when he first came to New Orleans, right?
But at the same time, those outlets were always there for those free yards that make the quarterback look great in the end and have 5,000. You don't throw for 5,000 if you're not getting a lot of easy dump-offs, quick slants, quick outs. And that's realizing that what you see the game as and yourself, your perception in your mind is different than what the real world is. And I think Jameis needed to come out of his own self-centered sort of view of things to start learning about that. And I will say, you look at his last season with Tampa, you look at over 5,000 yards passing, 5,100 and something.
Yes.
Over 30 touchdown passes, but the 30 interceptions. And you see a lot of the great, but you also have to throw a little bit of the blame on Bruce Arians, who basically wants to play that way, wants to have a gunslinging quarterback, and who matured himself as a coach this year and let Tom Brady change the way the Buccaneers play football, or they don't win a Super Bowl. So anybody can mature in any spot at a given time and learn lessons. I think Winston genuinely is starting to learn those lessons, and we should see the benefit of it on the field this year.
Got about a minute. NFL goes to a 17-game season. The Saints will be at Tennessee for their 17th game. They're going to utilize a lot of this for international games. But your thoughts on the expansion of the season, which I don't think was a surprise. The surprise to me is not that we haven't heard anything about expansion of rosters.
Right, and again, the union knew this was coming and agreed to allow it to happen. So people are really questioning DeMar Smith, the union head, and not the first time this has happened with him either. Yeah, it's really questionable because of the health of the players. Alvin Kamara was probably the first star in the league to say something negative about it right away, and he should. The players are going to benefit from this long term, but why this year is there only one bye still?
Right.
And where your bye falls is going to have such a huge impact on a team.
doubt.
You have to have multiple buys, starting now, even before you get to 18. In the future, eventually will be 18.
Will be, right.
And you've got to figure out a way to not only expand the rosters, but expand the active game day roster.
Exactly.
Because if you do that for the coaches, they will use more of their personnel. You'll have more specialists, and guys will have to suffer less snaps. And I say suffer because of the long-term effects as a result.
Look, I cannot believe the NFLPA did not insist. And look, I know they expanded the practice roster last year, again, for COVID-19. They allowed veterans to be part of that. This is not about the young players that you're grooming. These are about veteran jobs that the NFLPA should be fighting for. And if you're going to expand the season, you need to expand the roster for veterans and allow those veterans to be active on game day. I mean, as a matter of fact, I think it's ridiculous that you have inactives on game day at this point.
Teams want to spend more than their salary cap in most cases, especially the good ones. And you've had different rewards out there, for example, minority hiring that you can have. You can do that for teams as well as far as the roster goes. We already have rewards for veteran players. The fully invested veterans don't count as much against the salary cap, even if they're taking the low-end minimum salary. You can do more of that and reward teams for keeping more veterans at that level where they have to spend more. That's not part of the salary cap situation. Makes them a better, more mature team, and also benefits the players who have paid their dues in the league.
No doubt. Jude Young of CrescentCitySports.com, 106.1 Nash FM, All Access, and the voice of the UNO Privateers, our guest. I'm Eric Asher. We take a quick break to hear from our underwriters, and when we come back, we're going to jump into some Pelicans, LSU, Tulane. Can't have this show without talking about the Final Four. We'll get to that as well. All coming up here on Inside New Orleans Sports. Stay tuned.
Burkhart's Air Conditioning, Heating, and Refrigeration has been family-owned and operated since 1989. Burkhart has energy-efficient solutions and offers brands such as Mitsubishi ductless AC units and Amana, the only manufacturer with a lifetime unit replacement warranty. Burkhart's offers maintenance bundle packages that include servicing your AC, generator, and tankless water heater. For more information on the services Burkhart's provides, visit acpromise.com. Burkhart's Air Conditioning, Heating, and Refrigeration, providing comfort for life.
Experiencing rough weather with a bad roof can be a nightmare. It doesn't have to be.
Suburban Roofing, because when it comes to roofing, there is a difference.
Located at 3701 Iberville Street in Mid-City is Katie's Restaurant and Bar. Open 7 days a week, Katie's offers daily specials for lunch, dinner, and Sunday brunch. Serving New Orleans cuisine such as fried shrimp platters, grilled redfish, and a fully stocked bar. And don't forget about our expanded event seating and local entertainment. Featured on the Best of Food Network's diners, drive-ins, and dives, Katie's Restaurant and Bar.
Welcome back to Inside New Orleans Sports. Our guest today, Jude Young, CrescentCitySports.com, UNO Privateers, and also 106.1 FM. Let's go to the Pelicans. I want to get into the trading deadline. I want to talk a little bit about J.J. Redick's blasting in the front office. But let's start with Zion Williamson, who has played terrific basketball. Now, he's got a sprained thumb. I want to be interested to see again how this, we don't know the severity of the sprain. But again, he's handling the ball. We know he's physical inside. Look, we all played the game, right? You get hit on your thumbs,
absolutely.
Okay? Going to the basket, it's tough. How that's going to affect him, but he has been absolutely dominant or really since the All-Star break, when they even before that, when they started to allow him to be more the point forward.
And that's the key. That's what makes him truly special, because in today's NBA, his skills outside of being a creator, it's valuable, but it wasn't as valuable as you hoped as the #1 overall pick. That would be a dominant player. Every dominant player in the league has to be able to take the ball and make things happen, not only for themselves, for everybody else. And he has that point guard background. He grew into this amazing body that's so different. But yeah, we know the maintenance is going to be long-term difficult. But I think it's going to help him long-term to be more of somebody who's not taking the pounding as much, because he's creating, and he's so good at it, and he's only going to get better because he's grown by leaps and bounds just from the beginning of this season without a real off season. His ceiling is ridiculous as an offensive player. We wonder about defense, and when you talk about can you actually get to a championship competition level, I don't know, between him and Ingram being two of what I think will end up being a big three that I'd love to get into. But I just love what he's been able to do as a guy who has a joy for the game, who's unselfish, and his efficiency when he does keep the ball and go to the hole is insane. And he still has a jump shot that he's going to develop and get better and better at.
Yeah, and he will get better defensively. I mean, we talked about it. Part of the problem with, again, young players going into the NBA with 1 year of colleges, you don't have the defensive acumen. You have to learn that on the job. And the lack of practice with COVID-19 for Van Gundy, who's been a defensive specialist, we just haven't seen it yet. I think we'll see that over time.
Which is a team concept, which is positional awareness. Because you're not going to ask him, while carrying the load on one end of the court, to also, with that build, to match up with guys and lock them down.
Ball.
There are very few lockdown defenders. Those are specialists that you use in certain situations. They're not 36-minute-a-game guys. So people need to understand that. And Brandon Ingram's somebody who, because of his length, Williamson because of his quickness, his stop-start ability. Those guys can wind up being really good team defenders once, as you said, Van Gundy, wherever the long-term coach is, gets that right. Offense should continue to work itself out as long as the personnel develops, and I like the core of what they have right now.
Yeah. 21 and 25, 12th in the West right now, so they got some work to do. All right, trading deadline. They trade J.J. Redick and Nico Melli to Dallas for James Johnson and Wes Iwundu. 2021 second-round pick and cash considerations. Look, we're going to get into J.J. Redick in a moment and trashing the organization. Griffin had to get something for Redick and Melli. You're in a situation where you're a rebuilding team. You don't have the luxury of a buyout or sending a player where he wants to go simply because he's been a vested veteran that's been around 15 years. This is about the long-term viability of this franchise to win a championship. So every asset matters. So I was very critical of Dave Griffin if ultimately he was going to allow that buyout to happen, because you need to get assets. So J.J. Redick from there blast David Griffin, saying the front office, you can't trust this organization to keep its word, when in essence, Griff did exactly what he needed to do for the organization. To me, if J.J. Redick plays better, okay, if he's not hurt, the Brooklyn, the Knicks, even the Celtics or the Philly, where he wanted to go to the Northeast, they would have given up assets for him. They didn't want to do it because, again, he's a player on the downside of his career. I thought what he did was Bush League yesterday to go after the organization. And I thought, again, it really reeked of prima donna athlete who didn't get his way. And part of that's a byproduct of the NBA, where players feel like, again, they can pick and choose where they go.
Right, a spoiled athlete in that league who's been in the league for a long time, who seems to conveniently forget that the big part of this picture is a couple of years ago, less than a couple of years ago, he took the money to come to a non-contender, to get his over $13 million a year for a couple of seasons. And then after a year changed his mind and said, well, I want to be on a contender closer to home now, and I want to pick and choose all these things. Then don't sign a 2-year contract. Every contract in the NBA guaranteed, almost every single one of them, especially somebody on his level, fully. So you're getting that money. Don't sign the contract if you don't want to be in a position to ride it out. You're not going to be able to force your way out because of what you just said. David Griffin, in the end, had to get something to help his organization. And I do want to point out, though, that I think Redick, even though at one point said organization, he praised a lot of people, starting with Gail Benson, and a lot of what he dealt with here. was good.
Yes.
So when he was attacking the organization, he was really going after two
David
people, Griffin and Trajan Langdon.
Trajan Langdon, right.
And we don't know, and it's going to be a he said, unless some recording popped up out of the blue. We don't know what was actually said, but Redick is claiming that he was given an assurance that in the end he'd either get his buyout or traded to the Northeast region where he wanted to be. We have not, at this point, heard any comment, and probably never will, from Griffin on whether that ever occurred. And at the same time, if it did, then that is going to hurt the organization dealing with the prima donna NBA player long term, because they are going to hold that against Griffin, because if they can't trust him, they're not going to want to sign here. They're not going to want to deal with him. So that could hurt. But at the same time, I think Griffin's probably best at this point to completely ignore it and hope it goes away, because at least it's somebody like Redick, who's a role player at the end of his career, even though he does have a strong voice, and not somebody who's on a star level. Because once you start irking the stars in the league, you're going to have a hard time, even if you were to orchestrate a trade to add another one, to keep that guy around.
I agree with you to a point. They're in the infancy of this team around Zion. There will be players that will forget everything that ever happened with this if this team is winning.
Right.
If this team is on a championship run, there'll be those guys out there taking the one-year deal to chase a ring.
Right.
And all will be forgiven and forgotten. There could have been a conversation where David Griffin says, I'm going to try to move you there.
Right.
But at the end of the day, his allegiance has to be to the club.
No, I agree with that. But again, we haven't heard anything from Redick's agent, which is a good sign. So maybe that's just sour grapes from the player. Because the agent would be speaking up as somebody who's going to be the intermediary and hear what's going on. If the agent gets mad and is vocal about it in this case because he feels it's necessary, he or she, then that's really something that becomes a problem for the organization even more. And the fact that that hasn't happened is something that people don't think about, but it is important, because NBA agents, they're going to speak up if something's going on.
I agree with that, but remember, if you in his podcast, where he trashed Griffin and Langdon, he mentioned his agents will never trust this organization again.
Right. He spoke for them.
No doubt. No doubt. All right, let's get to the biggest thing that didn't happen, and that is, again, Lonzo Ball not being traded. Griff said that he came to him and said that he wanted to be a Pelican long term. This week, Lonzo backed that up, saying he wanted to stay here. All right, $18 to $24 million for Lonzo Ball. If ultimately you're going to re-sign him. It made no sense not to trade Lonzo Ball if you're not going to re-sign Lonzo Ball in the offseason. Take it from here, your thoughts.
Well, what could you get for him? Because you say, yeah, you've got to go ahead and get something for a guy, but in this case, if you're really going to get something that's going to hurt you in future negotiations with players because everybody's lowballing you, knowing he's an impending free agent, you can't make a deal. I think both sides feel the exact same way, which is not indifferent, but very much torn. I think that it's true from everything that we've heard that Lonzo Ball likes playing in this organization, loves his teammates, especially his star teammates. It's a fit for him in a lot of ways basketball-wise. I don't think he likes New Orleans, the market, all that much. It doesn't fit him, which is always going to be a problem with a lot of these NBA players who come from the major cities like he does as an LA guy. But at the same time, I think it's more of a concern that he doesn't like his usage. He believes that in the end, as he's developed into more of a 3-and-D, hit the long jumper, help space, and be a good defender, he believes that in the end he should be the guy with the basketball. That's not going to happen here very much for him. If he believes that, he's going to try to sign for a team that's going to pay him, that believes it too. And we keep hearing the Knicks and the Bulls, big markets, it's a fit in every way. And whatever that number is, he is restricted, and David Griffin's going to have to make a decision. But there's no guarantee at the same time that he's going to get that dollar amount Ball that he thinks he's going to get. And it may be a number that the Pelicans can work with, match it for now, and then flip him as an asset later if it doesn't work out. So when it came down to it, what you could get on the trade market wasn't there to just force a trade and hurt your reputation as a dealer if you're Griffin. And everything's still up in the air as far as what will actually happen in the offseason. And it wouldn't surprise me at all if he's a Pelican.
Right. The club had the back, when I say the club, players and coaches had the back of Eric Bledsoe this week. A lot of chatter. Look, I've talked about him. You talked about him on your show, right? Look, Eric Bledsoe laid on the leg of this franchise. He reminded me a lot of J.J. Redick this year. Okay, a guy that came here that, again, didn't want to buy into the rebuilding and did not play up to his capability. When the trade was made, I think most of us in the media looked at this and said, he's not Drew Holiday, but he's a cut below Drew
Sure,
Holiday.
yes.
And he's going to be able to be a guy that's going to be a veteran presence. He's going to be their top defender, and he's going to be a guy that can score. And if in a pinch, he could be your point guard if necessary. He's done none of that.
No.
Now, he's played much better since the trading deadline. And of course, they want to say that that was all about his shot coming back. The body language said he did not want to be here. It'll be interesting to see again how this kind of plays out as we get to the end of the season. And if he is going to be on the trading block, which I believe he will be, because it looks like, again, he's one of those veterans that says, look, I'm 31, in the twilight of my career. I want to chase a ring. I don't want to be here in a rebuilding mode here in New Orleans. Again, that's my take based on, again, body language. I'd love to get yours.
Eric Bledsoe never left the trading block. You just can't
Right.
trade him right now. And he put himself firmly on it when that wasn't necessarily a done deal. I think when the Pelicans traded for him, knowing he'd have 2 years and then a small buyout, that they thought they were getting a contract that had positive value and a guy that also would be able to contribute for them for at least a year and a half, and maybe the next trade deadline they'd be thinking about flipping it because of the value of the contract itself at that point. He put himself on the trade block because of the reasons you just mentioned. And just like Redick, I think he assumed that he would get what he wanted, but the rest of the league saw the way he was playing and said, why would I want that guy? He hurt himself. At the same time, the fit for him isn't as good because unlike Holiday, who did have the ball in his hands here a lot, that's not happening now with the point Zion led and Brandon Ingram having been an all-star with a big contract now. That's not happening for him, and he, unlike Holiday, doesn't fit as somebody who's as comfortable playing off the ball. Although Bledsoe's not a true point guard, he's somebody who needs the ball in his hands, who can be a creator, who can muscle his way to the basket even at his size, pretty good finisher. He's not getting those opportunities. I'll be curious to see, because first, he should never be in the starting lineup unless there's injuries. If he could be somebody who could now be molded into being a second unit spark plug who has the ball in his hands. The problem there is who's the player on the second unit who needs the ball in his hands? Kyra Lewis Jr. You don't want to take away the development from him, who's going to be a true creator and playmaker with his quickness with the ball. So the Pelicans are stuck between a rock and a hard place with him there because he doesn't fit as much as anything else.
To your point, they didn't know Zion could be a point forward.
Sure.
And they went into this season thinking Zion was going to be the guy. We got to get the ball down low, and then you need to surround him with shooters. He's going to kick it out. Okay. Now they will go in a different direction, I think, in the offseason and try to figure out again players that they can surround Zion that again can coexist with him having the ball in his hand the majority of the time.
And people need to be patient because all of this is just a series of individual development projects trying to fit these puzzle pieces together. Nobody thought this team was going to contend, but everybody was hungry to say, hey, they need to be a playoff team. They don't need to be as long as you're getting enough progress with guys on the roster. To see Jackson Hayes come to life since the flip of the new year, a light switch coming on, he's working on his body and his game. Of course, Lewis's talent. Nickeil Alexander-Walker needs to play to see what you have with him. Is he a gunner off the bench? Is he somebody who can be a spacer in the starting lineup? All those guys trying to figure out where they fit in defensively as well. It's a lot on the plate of a bunch of young players, and Zion is young as any of them except Lewis. So people need to be patient and realize this is a long-term contract that needs to start paying off in a year or two. But this year is definitely a development season, and there are a lot of individual cases where the development's been great.
I agree. Let's shift gears to college baseball. I want to go through this quickly. LSU, Tulane, UNO. Tell me where they are right now in their seasons.
Well, LSU doesn't know where they are right now. I don't think Paul Maneri knows what he has because pitching was supposed to be a deep strength, and it hasn't been. The bullpen is a coin toss no matter who you put in there when it was supposed to be the complete opposite of that. And even Jaden Hill hasn't been as good as they expected him to be, moving from the 1 to the 2 starter. But bigger problems, even when LSU hits, and they lead the nation in home runs, they don't seem to be very good in situational baseball at anything else. They strand a lot of runners on base, and it's killed them in their first 2 SEC series. And you almost have to throw out what happens this weekend against Vanderbilt because they're the #1 team in the country for a reason. They're loaded everywhere. Great starting pitching, which is going to be a joy to watch.
Coming off Tennessee,
Rocker and Leiter, So ridiculous, but that's the SEC. You're playing a ranked team every week, and the top 5 in the country are all SEC teams. So it's not a good year to be questioning yourself mid-season like the Tigers are. Paul Maneri said publicly this week he's hoping for a 2008 level run, which really kick-started his reign as head coach, the big, long winning streak into the postseason. I don't know if this team in this SEC can pull that off. And flipping, though, you'd rather be him than Travis Jewett at Tulane.
Right.
Because at this point, that program is not impressive.
Right.
It doesn't seem like he understands how to get and retain the talent with the challenges he faces there, despite having some real strengths to work off of as well. But conference is just starting this weekend. If Tulane turns it around and they're good in a weak league with only one good team, East Carolina at the top, and they have a good year, they've got enough young pieces that could improve a little bit. But if they don't, Tulane's fan base is usually pretty patient across the board. They're not about baseball, and they would like to see a change if this team doesn't have not just a winning record in conference, but they really need to be top 2 or 3.
How about UNO?
UNO had a great start to the season in conference with 5 straight wins, but their conference, the Southland, is really deep as well.
Yeah, it is.
A bit inconsistent, and what they've dealt with that other teams are dealing with as well is the idea that you're playing these 4-game weekends in 3 days. That decision that they made, and pitching winds up being total coin toss, especially on the doubleheader Saturday, and you get these wild, high-scoring games. But I think they feel like they're good where they are right now. Blake Dean likes the development of his starting rotation in general. Some bullpen arms have stepped up, and they're getting their key hitters healthier. A couple were banged up. They'll make the conference tournament. They're good enough to do that, which is an accomplishment in that league as deep as it is. But Southeastern is in first place. They're really good.
Yes.
They have the most pitching. And speaking of Tulane, Matt Reiser, Tulane product, 2-2 added up.
Right. The Southland, as you mentioned, very deep. When you look at Louisiana schools, playing some really good baseball.
Yeah, no doubt. Look, when you talk about baseball in this region in general, there's a reason why the college baseball programs across the state. La Tech, a top 20 team. ULL, although with the untimely depth, of course, unfortunate of Tony Robichaux, they're going through a transition with Matt Deggs. But, I mean, look what they've done over the last 25 years. That's because of the depth of high school baseball in the state and the quality of it that produces a lot of college-level talent that are good in the classrooms. You can get them in on academic aid as well as cutting up those, less than 13 total scholarships to fill a 35-man roster. I just think it's so impressive when you look at how so many programs in the state are good. ULM's gotten a lot better as well. And still there's enough talent to go around between here and neighboring states. That's the thing that stands out to me, and the quality of the baseball is only going to improve because Major League Baseball has cut down the size of minor league baseball. There's going to be more development of really good players who would have gone pro in the past, and Louisiana is going to benefit from it, and so will the young men playing high school ball right now looking for those opportunities.
LSU basketball finishes up on 19-10, lose to Michigan 86-78 in the round of 32. Will Wade's got the NCAA lurking, but also, again, he's going to lose Smart, Thomas, Days, and Walford all to the NBA. I don't think all those guys should go, but more than likely they will. I'm looking at the recruiting class coming in. It doesn't look great. Again, that can change over the next few months. He's got his work cut out for him.
It can change any minute because the story of college basketball right now, to me, it's even bigger than this Final Four, is the ridiculous number of players in the transfer portal.
Yes.
It's approaching 1,200 as we speak right now. That's enough to fill a complete roster of scholarship players for over 80 teams.
And guys with experience that are going to come in and play for you.
Guys looking for opportunities who have experience, some that are coming up from as mid-major stars who want to be Power 5 level, top 10 program level as far as conferences go, stars, as well as guys just in that level that are looking for better opportunities, better fits. If Will Wade finds the right kind of guys, LSU can still be good and even an NCAA tournament team again, but we're going to find out a ton in the next 3 to 4 weeks.
Let's talk quickly about the pro days. Tulane had their pro day out at Saints Camp. Cam Sample run a 4.79, did really great in all the drills, as did Patrick Johnson, 4.59. LSU had their pro day yesterday. The receivers really took the day with with Jamar Chase doing having a 4.38. Racey McMath had a 4.34. Terrence Marshall had a 4.38 as well. Kerry Vincent with a 4.33, and Tyler Shelvin, who again, the people worried about his weight, came in at 350 pounds. Your thoughts on the pro days for both Tulane and LSU?
Patrick Johnson made a ton of money running like that. He was already highly rated. Cam Sample is easily, if not a late second day pick, I would say by the 4th round, he has to come off the board, and Tulane is going to miss them dearly. To replace 2 guys in one unit, one part of your team, that level of talent, going to be a real challenge there. For LSU, nobody made themselves more money than Terrace Marshall. He jumped up from, can you slip into the first round, to he's clearly a first-round pick. And it's ridiculous how good the combination of Jefferson, Chase, and Marshall truly were.
Right.
How do you not have success?
Right.
Although Joe Burrow is still great.
Yes, yes.
How do you not have success with those guys
agree.
running around? And I'm happy for Racey McMath, the Edna Carr product, because he's going to get a chance in the NFL and maybe even get drafted, despite not playing a bunch because he's behind all this
But we've
talent.
seen LSU receivers do that, right?
Sure, it's happened
not
before.
play well and not get a lot of time at LSU, but end up being pretty good pro receivers.
Absolutely. Guys who have gotten their chance to do so, who hardly played at all, stuck on NFL teams for multiple years. He's a guy who doesn't have the great movement and great route running, but he's a big physical receiver who can take a top off a defense. Teams are always looking for that kind of guy, and come 6th, 7th round, wouldn't surprise me if he went off the board.
Got about 2 minutes left. I hate to put you against the clock on this one, but Coach O's comments about not interviewing his assistants after the 2019 championship game. Your thoughts?
Coach O just needs to understand that you need a filter when you're doing these interviews. And considering he's been the head coach for several years now and led a team through a national championship run, I'd like to know what he's thinking when he makes these really honest comments we've heard lately, with this being the last of them. Of course, you think he's trying to send a message and put a little bit of the blame, or a lot of it, on his AD,
I don't think there's
Scott
any doubt.
Woodward. I think that we talked about that before the show. That's pretty much the case here. But and when a new AD comes in during your reign as a coach, you always have to, no matter how much success you've had, you always have to feel like they're looking for their guys. So that relationship may not be the best moving forward, simply because of that dynamic, which is normal. But at the same time, Ed, you got to be more careful with your words. You're not a craftsman when it comes to the media. You're likable, but you're not somebody who can craft a message as well as you think you do. So be a little bit more careful, because everybody virtually around the area is rooting for the guy to be able to get the job done long term, because that's the question, long term. He's done it short term.
Well, let me ask long term, because now he's kind of been pulled into this sexual harassment, sexual assault situation at LSU, again with the Superdome security guard getting sexually harassed by Darius Geis. The legislature committee is saying they're going to put him before the legislature. Is that going to hurt his survival at LSU?
Well, you talk about being put before people to answer to it based on what we just discussed. That's the greatest concern. Even more so now than winning, because it's going to come down to winning otherwise. As long as he's successful and you don't have a weird dip like 2020, you had the COVID year excuse, LSU, in their very worst season, assuming a 12-game schedule, should win 8 regular season games. Very worst, and that can happen maybe once every 10 years. This LSU team's good enough to win 10, 11 games, and they should. If they don't, then his capital, his power within that system will drop very quickly, because LSU's not going to tolerate anything less than contention.
Jude Young, thanks so much for joining us. Again, Jude Young, CrescentCitySports.com, 106.1 FM, 6 p.m. on Tuesday nights, and also the voice of UNO Privateers. Thanks so much for tuning in. Remember, plenty of ways to be able to catch this program now. We're live streaming on YouTube at 1 o'clock every Thursday. Of course, our live broadcast Thursday at 1. At 6 p.m. on Thursday nights on WLAE-TV. On The Deuce, Thursdays at 10 p.m. Back on Pelican Sports Television, Friday night, 9 o'clock on Pelican, 10 o'clock on WLAE on Friday nights, Saturday 2 a.m. on The Deuce, and then 5 p.m. on Pelican Sports Television. Always at ericasher.com, always on the WLAE YouTube page, and always on our social media platforms, at Eric_Asher on Twitter, Eric Asher on Facebook. Again, want to thank Jude Young for joining us. Also want to remind everybody, don't forget about the radio show. 4 to 6 weekdays, 106.1 FM, talking sports and also New Orleans politics and news. So check us out there on the iHeartRadio app, the TuneIn Radio app, ericasher.com, and of course our podcast available on all the major podcasting platforms. Special thanks to Jude Young for joining the program. Our fantastic underwriters who make this show possible. Please support those underwriters. And of course the staff here at WLAE-TV. It does a fantastic job each and every program. Ron Yeager, Jim Dotson, Tommy O'Connor, Tommy Fairley, and the best director of the business, Will Hill. All right, thanks so much for tuning in. We will check you next week for another edition of Inside New Orleans Sports. Happy Easter to you and your family. For Jude Young, I'm Eric Asher. See you next week.